Okay.
REC. You're a genius.
Alright guys, in this session Jill Walker will unlock the lid of her treasure chest to show you how to release the magic within your CRM data. This magic is so often left hidden, the diamonds are mistaken for coal, and CRM gets the blame when all that is needed is the key. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jill Walker. I hope that was upbeat enough.
Who here believes that many people and organisations fail to get the full value of the data that they've got in their CRM, or for that matter, other enterprise systems?
Did you say files?
Thank you. My intention for the next 30 minutes is to share some inspiration and to give you some thought-provoking ideas that may, over time, help you solve this problem. I realise that this is session number 8, if we include all the introductions. And probably by now, on a Saturday morning, you're getting a little bit weary. So I'm going to give you this 30-minute session in 3 parts. I'm going to start with talking about the naughty child, and we've actually already been introduced to the naughty child. I'm then going to move on to the map, and finally, as Gareth alluded to, the key. This photo reminds me of a nursery rhyme. There was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was horrid. The reason I am reciting this nursery rhyme is not that I've gone completely off my rocker, but because this nursery rhyme reminds me of so many CRM projects, full of potential, and yet, when they go bad, they can go very, very bad, and they can become horrid very quickly. I'm sure everyone here has at least heard of projects that are horrid for various reasons. So when clients put forward their business case for CRM, what sort of reasons are they giving? If your experience is anything like mine, the reasons will have been for some combination of efficiency, visibility, and decision making. Efficiency of processes. Getting the sales process, the customer resolution process, be that in banking, be that in whatever organisation. Customers want that process to proceed from person to person without losing information, without having to repeat information unnecessarily. Or they want visibility of data so that everybody who needs to be able to see that data can see the data. And equally, a flip side of that is people who shouldn't see data can't see data, although it does tend to be the former that gets into the business case when we're first putting forward CRM. A client that I was involved in a few years ago had a situation where they had so much data scattered in so many different places that the unofficial process prior to any customer meeting was to go and talk to one of two gentlemen. That was bad enough with the effects that it had on the efficiency of those two gentlemen who just went from one meeting to another, giving the background of this client, that client, and another client. The absolute aha moment for the client was when they realised that both of these gentlemen were 18 months away from compulsory retirement. And then they were left thinking, what is going to happen to all of that data? At that point, they decided to implement a solution. The third reason is decision making. Every business has to make decisions. We've already seen some examples of that this morning. CRM should be an absolute gem to help us make decisions. After all, it takes that transactional information from the users as they are doing their jobs, applies some business analytics, some business intelligence, and returns it back to either those same users or different users in an easily digestible form. Or at least that is the dream. The reason that we will never hear in those business cases for CRM is so that we can capture more data, so that we can ask more questions before we start to help our customers, solve our customers' problems, answer their questions, whatever our line of business is. And yet, so many projects focus on that data collection, not the data use. I'm going to let you into a secret here. Data is useless. Even though I quite happily stand here and say that data is useless, we can put it to good use. And we put it to good use by converting it to information. Everybody knows this. And in spite of them knowing this, they focus on data collection and data entry. They are not following it through and looking at how ultimately they are going to use that data. I came across an organisation, admittedly several years ago, who had added 93 custom fields to the lead entity in Microsoft CRM. Those 93 custom fields were a massive range of data, including things like the PO number. Now, anyone that knows anything about the sales process, and I can see several people in the audience smiling, will know that PO number and lead just don't sit nicely together. But this customer wanted the PO number at the lead. Now, the reason they wanted the PO number was because the CEO had mandated that they had to have a 97% win rate for their opportunities. 97% of all your leads won? That's not going to happen. So the way it was made to happen was by doing the entire sales process in the lead, including the PO number, and by the time it was converted to an opportunity, it was so close to a done deal that they did manage to get that 97% win rate. But, back to the data collection point of this story, the people doing the implementation didn't understand some of the plumbing and techniques within Microsoft CRM. So most of those 97 fields
Sorry, I think the other session's running a little bit late.
Do you want me to wait a bit?
No.
Okay.
They're running late, so you'll just get a email.
Fine. So most of those 97 fields got to be rekeyed into the opportunity. You can imagine what the users thought of that for a process.
I think we got them all.
Following on from understanding the flow of data and that being essential if you are going to tame the beast of your CRM data, another challenge
Sorry, I thought
Another challenge that I see surprisingly often is what I call the valley approach to data. So you find people who figured out how to enter a lead, how to create a customer, something of that nature. But then when it comes to either taking that sale through or maybe doing a mass mail out or a number of the other things that probably everybody here knows is possible in CRM, they've not figured that out. So they export their data, their customer data, into some other familiar tool that they already know. They've already figured out how to do, for the sake of argument, a mail merge from Excel. They then manage that data inside Excel. They do their mail merge, they track the sale, they raise an invoice, whatever is relevant to them. And then, to make it even worse, they re-import that data back into CRM so that they can do something else with it. Or maybe the worst example I ever saw of this was not so that any user anywhere in the organization could do anything with it, but just so the data was in CRM. So we've got a lot of data at the beginning, a nice big valley in the middle, and then another peak at the edge. The valley approach to data management. And that, of course, is one of the ways that we lead to data silos. Different lumps of data for every area of the business. Not only do we have lumps of data, but the processes required to bring that data together so that we can get any useful information out of it are manual, time-consuming, and tedious. I was aware of an organisation pretty recently who had taken this to such an extreme that they had one of their sites competing against other sites. They had so little understanding of their data that it was only when a client pointed out, why are you pitching product B against product A when they are both your products? And I'm only aware of that happening once, but I suspect that if we did a straw poll, we would see a lot more of that sort of thing. This paper by the Aberdeen Group said, not surprisingly, that organisations who can eliminate data silos and data segregation will improve not only year-on-year revenue, but year-on-year profit. So if that isn't an impetus to tame the beasts of your CRM data, I don't know what is. Those of us who've been talking to customers will know that the hot questions that are being asked are not simple data questions. Hot questions are not things usually like, how many calls did we get yesterday? How many sales have we made? Hot questions are things like, why are customers contacting us? Which products or processes need to be addressed to solve these problems? What sales offers have we been making, and which of them are resonating with customers, and why? What competitive intelligence can we gather from our customers and elsewhere? And which agents are really rocking at customer service? And how can we leverage what they're doing so that we can all improve? So those questions superficially are quite simple. But once you start looking at the data that is sitting in behind those questions, they are amazingly complex. And there's a lot of words in those questions that fit very nicely in a board report or in a business case for CRM. But once we start drilling into them and working out how to give the answers to those questions, they start to become really quite woolly. So why do we have all these problems? The challenges with data can be summed up with the 5 V's: velocity, variety, validity, veracity, and the biggest of them all, in more ways than one, is volume. Data is complex, and there is absolutely not one rule that fits all. Some data changes very rapidly. Some data is almost carved in stone. They need dealing with in different ways. Some data is huge. Some data is much, much smaller. Some data needs ongoing maintenance. Some data stays pretty static. But if it needs ongoing maintenance, who can we allow to do that maintenance? And we need to think about that, because it's not just, does the user understand the basics of opening up a record, going in and making changes, but does the user sit closely enough to that data to be able to make those changes responsibly? It's amazing how often people want a requirement, and when you drill into the requirement, it's, in case I make a mistake. Well, we then get challenges, because implementing something so that we can do a rollback purely to overcome an error, and preventing that same rollback to be used to abuse the system, is incredibly difficult. And once you start thinking about that, you'll see where I'm coming from. Some examples from directly within a CRM solution that speak to some of these points. We heard earlier about insurance policies, and how insurance policies, as I'm sure we all know, are different depending on your age. So if you were an insurance company, knowing the age of the customer is probably important to you. There will be some of your products that are only valid or only appropriate and can only be pitched to somebody over 25. You may have others that are very specific for a pensioner, different age again. If we have the age field as a data entry field in CRM, that is immediately going to be wrong. It meets the immediate requirement. We can see that Fred is 29. Except if that 29 was data entered more than a bit ago, he may well not be 29 anymore, he may be 30. And depending on how big the bit gets, it may even be that Fred is now eligible for those pensioner level products. That's unlikely, but it's certainly possible. Think about the states in Australia and how many different ways, if a text field was used, could we record New South Wales? And if that happens, what is the impact on targeting everybody in New South Wales, or the process required to target everybody in New South Wales, or any associated reporting about people in New South Wales? Think also about social and Internet of Things, both of which we've heard a little bit about this morning. And think about the sheer volume of data that they are producing and the effect of that on any ultimate CRM solution that maybe you are building. So now we understand a little bit of the problem that we've got in this whole data and the data that can become a beast if we are not careful. So what is the solution? In the next few slides, I'm going to highlight, but it is highlight, some of the points that you need to be aware of. Inside Dynamic CRM, we have a range of tools that will help us manage all of this data. I'm only going to focus on those that are internal to Dynamic CRM. But there are lots and lots and lots of products external to CRM, Dynamics 365, that can also help us tackle the challenge that we have at hand. But if we focus on the internal solutions or the components that we may choose to use, we've got views, advanced find, charts, dashboards, reports, and a whole range of data management tools. And this is only looking at the bulk of the data management inside CRM. Views, as I'm sure everyone here is aware, are just lists of data. We can sort them, we can search them, but that is pretty much about all we can do. We cannot, with a view, give a summary or any statistical derivation. So they definitely have their uses, but they also have their problems. Advanced find. I have coined the phrase that advanced find, once fully understood, is the answer to most, not all, but most of the questions that you might have about data in your CRM. But it's not instant. So pretty much any user has access to that little funnel icon, or the button with the words Advanced Find if you're still using an older version of the product. But that's only the very first step. You've got to understand what it means. You've also got to have an appropriately structured data underneath. Let's go back for a moment to the example I gave earlier about New South Wales. Even if we have shown a user how to use Advanced Find, what is the probability of them getting the right answer if we have got NSW, New South Wales, N.S.W, and all of the other variants that I won't bore you with? So the user is really going to be challenged if we've got problematic data underneath. We also have charts. They are great for giving you a pictorial summary of that list of data. So they do solve some of the problems with views, but they by no means solve all of them. We're still not able to get those statistical derivations which are commonly required. Another big problem is the understanding of an appropriate chart to use to show whatever data we've got. On the slide, I've chosen pretty much at random to use a pie chart. That does give me the proportion of, in this instance, the origin of our customer support cases. But it doesn't really tell me how many customer support cases we're getting. All I've got is the relative proportion. Another trap that I've seen people fall into, not only with Dynamics 365 charts, but with charts elsewhere, is looking at the axes. I've seen people thinking that a big drop in a line chart means that the world is about to end. It certainly looks that way. But then you go in and you think that that drop is from 84 to 83. And it just happens that all of the other data that we were plotting fitted ever so very nicely between, for the sake of argument, 80 and 85. And so this huge drop was, in the real world, negligible. But we've got this complete panic going on because, look, it's right down through the base axis. Something awful must be about to happen. Dashboards, a brilliant way of getting a real-time snapshot of data. Real-time is important because we don't only want the information at some nice, convenient and predictable time, such as the Monday morning meeting. We want it when we want it. And a properly constructed dashboard with the elements that are relevant to us is one way of achieving that. Most of the features that I've looked at so far are also available to users. So they don't necessarily need the aid of a technical person to give them all of these things. But they need to, A, know that they're available, and B, understand what they are trying to do. And that is something that can often be missed in a number of projects. Dynamics 365 also gives us a number of reports which give us further depth of information than we can get from dashboards. These are problematic in that while they give you great data from the out-of-the-box system, to get your customizations to also show in these reports can be really, really challenging. We also have the challenge of what exactly is a report. There are many people who will use pretty much any of the solutions that I've mentioned earlier. Could also be a report. But we show them something like this and they're really happy and it meets their requirements. And then they think, oh, but we've got the report wizard. I'll just go and create it myself. Well, never in a month of Sundays is the report wizard going to generate something of that nature. So again, we've got challenges. And then these tools that are made available to us. Tools that help us bring data in from other systems. Tools that enable us to track duplicates. Tools that enable us to apply translations to labels and so on in the system. There is an awful lot there, but it's all got to be unlocked so that we can take advantage of it. So how do we choose which of all of those tools we've got we should use? The answer to that, and Neil spoke a little bit about this morning, is in the scoping of the project. What's important to the client? What will add value? What should we include? And perhaps more importantly, what should we exclude from the project? And that's something that is a question that, in my opinion, is not asked perhaps as often as it should be. But when we are looking at what should we include and what should we exclude, I would suggest that you really need to think about beginning with the end in mind. And the end, of course, should be what data outputs do you need from your solution, because it is those data outputs that should guide all of the decisions that go before. And of course, as Forrest Gump said, if you don't know where you are going, then you probably won't end up there. And I think that is quite possibly one of the main causes as to where those naughty children that we all admitted we were aware of get their origin. I love this slide because simple and easy are so often seen as synonyms, and they're not. CRM is simple, but it is not easy. And yet, all the time, we are up against, but it should be simple. It's part of Office, isn't it? They've both got 365 in. I can send an email. We don't need to do any training. We've got users. They've been using Outlook. They've been using Word. They've been doing whatever. Why do we need training? I doubt I'm saying anything that you haven't heard previously. So what do we need to do? What is the key? How do we tame that beast of CRM data? Step one is to know what you've already got. And certainly what's in the box is a big part of that. And this can be challenging because in a typical CRM project, and I'm talking now an implementation project rather than more of a functional upgrade type project, but in a typical CRM project, there are about a dozen skills that are required. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that we need a dozen or more people, because many of us, and probably including most of the people in this room, have got many of those skills. The challenge we've got is very few people have all of those skills. But it is essential that a lot of people, not only on the project team, but in the client themselves, knows to a degree what is already there in the box before we start configuring or customizing, writing code, whatever it might be. That is important because knowing what you've got out of the box is how you can get the low-hanging fruit, how you can get those quick wins so you can deliver something to the client very, very quickly and give them something that possibly they can go live with almost right now. Maybe, maybe not. Again, we heard about some of the challenges there from Neil. Certainly don't reinvent the wheel. I've been involved in so many project rescues where people have reinvented the wheel. I was involved in one project where the product catalogue was deemed too complex. There were too many ways of selling products. So some kind soul that called themselves a developer completely rewrote that product catalogue so that we just had single line items. Because initially that's what the client thought. Then another department needed to come online. And that department sold the same products differently. We couldn't just add a load more lines comprising product, unit of measure, price, whatever was in there, because then we couldn't get the reporting. If we want to know how many tickets to a particular event have been sold, we want the number of those tickets. The fact that some of them were sold that way and some of them were sold that way is irrelevant. We need the total. And the product catalogue as it exists will do that. Not only was this product catalogue completely rewritten, it was then interfaced to an ERP system. I will leave the rest of that one to your imagination, but it wasn't pretty. Another similar project that I was involved in, admittedly this one was longer ago than the first one, this one was probably about 10 years ago, was somebody implementing Microsoft CRM. The first thing that they did, they said, Microsoft CRM doesn't support jobs. So we need to create a custom entity for jobs. Customizing and configuring forms is a bit hard. I'm a .NET developer, so instead of playing around with all of that stuff that I don't really understand, I'm going to write an ASPX page and I'm going to save it into the IIS folder structure that is the web page. We spent years, once we picked that up, supporting that because it was done in such a way that migrating it to the order, which in real terms, once you analysed what a job was, it was an order. It could have been implemented in a matter of days. and probably a relatively few dollars, instead of something that took months and thousands of dollars because they reinvented the wheel. We also need to be a trusted advisor to our clients. We need to know the difference between a business requirement and a technical solution. I've seen the wheels on this one come off, often due to terminology. A client or a client user comes to you and says, in this organisation, we have a business rule that every lead needs to be followed up within 4 hours. So a technician goes in and starts looking at business rules. Now, I challenge any of you to use the technology that in Dynamics 365 we call business rules to implement that requirement of every lead must be followed up within 4 hours. I'm not saying we can't implement that requirement. We certainly can. What we can't do is use a business rule within Dynamics 365, which is, after all, what the client asked for. So we need to be those trusted advisors. We need to push back onto the client and give them real advice, and not just say, take on board what they want and say, oh, I'm just in IT. I'll run away to my dark little hole and I will implement that. That is where a lot of these problems come from. So, we have looked in the last 30 or so minutes at how CRM can be a naughty child. I've given you a very rapid overview of some of the causes of the problem. And I've also touched on what are some of the solutions. So if we take on board all of those key points, we will be able to tame the beast of CRM data.
Hi. You done?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. We've got time for questions. Any questions? Hi.
Choosing the data. So when you are doing a CRM project, it happens most of the time that you have to integrate with other systems to collaborate the data and share, right? So my question is that what is the best way that you choose which data should be part of the CRM, right? Or which data should be kept in another system and maybe use other techniques to show it to the users?
Brilliant question. Unfortunately, there is no simple answer. And it comes down to doing the scoping and what's important for that particular project. In a way, you partially answered your own question, in that if there are certain elements within that data that need to be shown to the user as part of a CRM form, view, report, whatever, those elements need to come into CRM. They may also have certain dependencies in behind them. So the fact that that element needs to come in may mean that some of those dependencies in behind it need to come in. But if there is no need to show it to a user and it doesn't influence anything else and it's managed very nicely, thank you, by whatever this other system is, I would say leave it in the other system. It is completely variable. There is definitely no one-size-fits-all, but to give you a high-level, non-specific answer, that would be my approach.
Any more questions? Is that it? Really? Great. I think that's it. Thanks, Jill. Okay, next up we have Mr. Tribe. Thank you.
Hello.
Your laptop?
Got like some